Okay, so somebody wants to talk a little bit about where some of my survivalist stuff comes from, and I have to admit at this point I didn't invent it all. I just happen to be a little bit more prolific on the internet with some of this than other people have been. And there's been an evolution over the years where a lot of people have gotten into the whole survivalist, the prepper thing. Maybe they came out of the military, maybe not. Maybe they came out of some other stuff. But a lot of this is going to go back to the 1980s and some of the early published things and some of the old Vietnam vet guys who are publishing this stuff. One of which I've been able to find online again, not particularly active online, and his books, videos, and publications by today's standards might look like they're lacking. The guy deserves some recognition on the history of things. And it's a Vietnam-era Green Beret by the name of Don Paul. And I'm going to put a link to his channel here. He's only got, let's see, I'll look up. I think he has less than 100 subscribers. Last video was 4 years ago. He's obviously a little older now. But he was one of the early published gurus of this whole thing. And one of the people who was talking about, putting the groups together, forming the groups, and that sort of a thing. What's happened is a lot of people have lost contact and lost recognition over the years. But there have been people in some internet forums who would tell me I'm full of shit because I was a younger guy in those times. And a lot of those guys are no longer active to stick up for themselves. Obviously, Jeff Cooper doesn't say much anymore, although there's a tremendous amount of previously published stuff. So, if I were to be told I'm full of shit for advocating that people with me would carry 45s, and I got some other guy who claims that the Glock 19 is the greatest weapon ever invented, whatever, man. On the other hand, when we talk about survival group versus an individual, if you're looking to have some kind of lone shooter guerrilla campaign, okay, that's probably a different thing, and it probably isn't going to be conducive to long-term survival as a lifestyle. Okay, I don't. Not too many fugitives are successful people in the world. That's kind of a thing for the movies. Okay, that's kind of like that's mainly a thing for the movies. And I would say this: if you only speak one language and only have connections in one nation in this world, and you're talking about, being the lone wolf guerrilla, whatever that stuff is, that's just somebody who's engaging in a fantasy. And there's a reason why somebody in that standpoint is just an individualist. And it has to do with the fact that probably it's dumb, okay? Somebody's going to not really go along with that. On the other hand, there's a lot of dangers being involved with the wrong groups, or the wrong person getting into a group. And when you're looking at hostile parties who are constantly on the prowl to find somebody they can trip up, somebody they can put in prison, somebody they could rob or extort, they are going to be a little bit more likely to target a richer take on putting a group down than simply finding an individual, although high-profile individuals are definitely going to be a target of that too. One of the big differences now, especially for those of us who use the internet as a filtering mechanism, is that when people connect, it tends to be known by other people. So if you have a bad person who is circulating among the survivalists or among the survivalist groups, and they've interacted with 3 or 4 different groups and maybe, a dozen different individuals, it gets figured out whether or not those interactions, who was at fault, what was going on. And if you have a hater group or a hater party that's really after somebody, they have to coordinate all that effort to build up a reputation with so many different people and so many different aspects of the subculture. It becomes much more costly to put anybody down, because then it gets figured out. And we saw that a few years ago in the situation between Mike Hollingsworth and Charles Dyer. Now, Mike Hollingsworth succeeded in getting Charles Dyer thrown in prison. We also saw that there were multiple groups that were after Charles Dyer when he became a higher profile individual. We also have to look at it from the standpoint that he wasn't really the survivalists do. A lot of his people, a lot of the American resistance movement people were trying to recruit from among survivalists, but that wasn't their stated goal. Okay, that wasn't their stated goal to begin with. But also notice that right now, several years later, Mike Hollingsworth is not active on YouTube. The group that he had for a while, I believe, is active, but they're a little bit more secretive now. One of the other individuals who had produced a group that was geared toward infiltrating what he felt were militia groups, but he also seemed to have a fair amount to say negatively about prepper groups, was by the name of James Nix, and he had a website and an organization called Hate Trackers, which had started to implode due to internal conflicts before the government got involved and took them down, because Hate Trackers, and James Nix in particular, was running multiple criminal enterprises using a cooperative agreement with the FBI as a cover for crimes against the general population, usually involving credit fraud. And that's one of the reasons James Nix is doing prison time right now. So did they succeed in putting Charles Dyer down? Yes, they did. However, that spread. And a lot of the reason that spread was the success of internet-coordinated groups, where a lot of people are kind of sorting stuff out on the internet before everybody meets in person. That increases the rewards and reduces the risk that a lot of people who normally would be inclined toward only individual preps or individual action can look at that and say, hey, listen, if I make a few steps on the net and people get to know me and I'm a good guy and they're a good guy and everybody kind of figures it out, then it's a little bit safer, and you gain the benefits of a group coordination on stuff, because no matter how smart you are, no matter how good you are, how slick you are, whatever resources you have, you got to sleep sometime, okay? No matter how good your vehicle is, and your weapons, all this other kind of stuff, it's pretty hard to drive and shoot at the same time. It's pretty hard to drive, park your vehicle, and secure an area without somebody else watching the vehicles, without somebody else at the vehicles. The same goes for coordinating anything to do with any kind of bug out location, supplies. I've made videos clearly demonstrating the impossibility of bugging out in a normal sized vehicle with sufficient supplies to go long term. It's not really going to happen. A true relocation means a lot of things. One, it requires a convoy that's so large you're going to have more than one driver. And when you're running a convoy like that, you also need passengers in those vehicles to take on other tasks, such as navigation, security, maintenance for the vehicles. They start getting a large enough convoy of used or even somewhat newer vehicles. You get a number of vehicles where you're going to have maintenance people too. And it's that whole balancing of different tasks that is part of the survival group management. And it's not just a leadership thing, because everybody really has to pick up their own load and part of the group load in order to gain the benefits of the levels of group coordination that can really put you in a position of not just having serene headspace or feeling better about something, but in actually having the actual capability of successfully dealing with any kind of contingencies, or at least several kinds of contingencies that can and will come along throughout life. And that's where we're really talking about as this whole thing develops and as we get a new evolution of the survivalist movement right now, especially with regard to YouTube. But I'm going to put a link here to Don Paul's stuff and his books. It's not impressive by current internet standards, but we also have to realize this is one of the guys who got a lot of this stuff going. He's one of the guys who, maybe even a couple of steps down, was a true inspiration for a lot of this.